Carnival. On the line now is James Hardiman, the leisure analyst at Wedbush Securities. James, Carnival is looking for this sizable amount of money. Should it get it?
Well, should is a difficult question. I mean, this is an amount of money that they're getting from either potential equity investors, potential banks, potential bondholders. I think for the most part, that money is lined up. I think the should question is maybe a little bit more appropriate as we look to the stimulus bill from last week. And ultimately, they were excluded from that. And I think a lot of politicians and I think a lot of their constituents said that no, they shouldn't have access to those Treasury loans. We'll see if that changes in the future, but that's where we stand right now.
So as we look at the major cruise lines, do any of them risk going bankrupt, getting to the stage of requiring to file for Chapter 11 protection because of this crisis? Can you see that happening?
It's a plausible scenario. To be clear, I think it's a pretty unlikely scenario at this point. But I think that solvency risk or that liquidity risk is I think it's safe to say it's higher than it's ever been. Now, it's not 50%. I don't think it's 20%. What the likelihood is a difficult question to answer, but I think it's unlikely. But certainly that risk has gone up. If Carnival is successful in getting this $6 billion, and I think today it was actually up to closer to $7 billion, certainly that minimizes that risk for them. They've said that they should have enough liquidity for at least 12 months. Right. With that money. Now, I'm not entirely convinced that this is only going to last 12 months, but that certainly puts them in a much better position.
You see that? You see, that's the point. That's the point that you raised quite rightly, that even after the ships are open and sailing again, there is a stigma and a stench over cruising, fair or otherwise, I'm not saying, but there is this stigma that will take a lot longer for consumers and holidaymakers to be comfortable about.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt. I think eventually we're going to slowly go back to something approaching normality. We're going to go back to work. We're going to go back to school. We're going to get back on airplanes. I think cruising is dead last in terms of that activity hierarchy, right? I think people are going to think about how risky is the activity and how important is the activity. And I think in both cases, their answers would tell them that getting on a cruise ship anytime soon doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, I think it'll eventually, this is an industry that I do think will come back and ultimately thrive. I just think it's going to take a long time.
Good to talk to you, sir. I appreciate it. We'll follow on. Thank you, sir. Now, when we come back...